Hey guys, and welcome to my 2015 Boston Red Sox season preview. I think that the Red Sox improved themselves vastly from last year, with guys like Hanley Ramirez and Pablo Sandova signing with them, and them trading for guys like Rick Porcello and Wade Miley for the rotation. I think that they are going to be vastly improved just by those signings. The other guys that they added this offseason were Anthony Vivaro, I think his name is. He's a pretty good reliever. Justin Masterson, who I think is going to not be quite as horrible as he was last year for the Indians, and Alexi Ogando, the former Rangers pitcher who throws really hard. And the only players that they really lost this offseason are Yoenis Cespedes, Alan Webster, Ruby De La Rosa, and Will Middlebrook. So now I'm going to talk about the position players, and I'm going to start off with the catcher, Christian Vasquez, who is a young player who is very good defensively but not very good offensively. I think that the Red Sox can hold a player like that in this lineup, a light-hitting catcher, because they have so many other pieces around them that can hit very well. And at first they have Mike Napoli, who is a very good hitter. Last year he had a bit of a down year, but I look for him to get back to what he's done the past 2 or 3 years before that, where he was a solid 800 OPS type guy and well above average as a hitter. Second, they have Dustin Pedroia as usual, and he had a bit of a down year last year, like a number of Red Sox, but I think he's going to go back to hitting 300 and hitting 10-15 home runs like he normally does this year. And at shortstop, they have one of their biggest disappointments from last year, Xander Bogaerts, who's a very young player who is very good with the glove, but hasn't really shown much with the bat yet. This year, I think he's going to improve slightly with the bat and continue to play good defense. It's probably one of their weaker positions, and as far as position players go. At third, they have one of their biggest offseason acquisitions, Pablo Sandova, who has been pretty solid the last few years. He's had a little bit of a drop off, but he's still been solid, hitting 270-ish and hitting 15-20 home runs and playing underrated defense. And considering his size, most people don't think he's a good defender, but he's adequate as a third baseman. In left field, they have their other big offseason acquisition, Hanley Ramirez, who always has pretty solid offense, above average offense, but he's not very good with the glove anymore at short or third. So I think moving him to the outfield will be very beneficial to the Red Sox, considering they have pretty good options at shortstop and third right now. In center, they have a plethora of options that they go to, but it looks like they're going to go with Yunichi Tazawa, the Cuban-born player who played in about 10 games last year and was really impressive. He hit like 333 in 40 at-bats and a couple home runs. So I think they have a lot of promise there in center field with that player. In right field, they have Mookie Betts and Shane Victorino that they go to. I'm assuming it's going to be Mookie Betts because in the couple of months he played last year, he was really impressive. So I think he's a promising young player who's probably going to be an all-star at some point. So I think that they should definitely go with him. And Victorino is kind of washed up in my opinion. So I think Betts is the option there. And I think that he'll be good this year in his first full year. Of course, at DH, you have Big Papi, David Ortiz. He's getting really old, but he's still putting up really good numbers, and I expect him to do that again this year. Not much to say about him. On the bench, John Farrell has a lot of good options, including Alan Craig, who's a former All-Star, and I think he's going to bounce back from last year in a part-time role. And Shane Victorino, assuming he's not going to start, who's still a decent player. I don't think he's an all-star anymore, but he's still solid. And Daniel Nava, who's a good backup outfielder. And, of course, Brock Holt, who had a solid year last year, no doubt. And he'll be a good utility infielder for them this year, definitely. And Ryan Hannigan, who they acquired as the backup, I'm assuming to use as the backup catcher in the offseason. He's a solid little catcher. Nothing special, but he's productive as backup catcher, no doubt. My projected lineup for the Red Sox this year will be Mookie Betts leading off, and then second is Dustin Pedroia. Third will be David Ortiz. Fourth, Hanley Ramirez. Fifth, Pablo Sandoval. Sixth is Mike Napoli. And seventh is Resny Castillo, the center fielder. And eighth and ninth are interchangeable in my opinion with Vasquez and Bogaerts. So you know, whatever John Farrell feels like. And the bench is one of the better ones in the American League, no doubt, with Alan Craig and Brock Holt and Daniel Nava coming off the bench. That's really solid. I mean, you can't get much better than that. Some of those guys are former All-Stars, so pretty sweet. And now on to probably the weakest part of the Red Sox roster, which is the starting rotation. Leading off with, my opinion, is their best pitcher in the starting rotation, Rick Porcello, who had a really good year last year, and I think he's going to continue that in Boston. Next, I'm going to talk about Wade Miley, who last year with the Diamondbacks had a pretty bad year for him. About a run higher than usual with his 4.5 ERA. Normally he's in that 330, 350 range, and I think he's going to bounce back and be in that range again with the change of scenery and the talent that he has. And he's always been a solid pitcher to me, so I definitely look forward to him bouncing back with the Red Sox this year. Next, I'm going to talk about Justin Masterson, who had a bad year last year, and I think he's going to be a little bit better. He's not going to have a 5.5 ERA again, but I don't think he's going to be an all-star like he was a couple of years ago. Even that year when he was an all-star, he really wasn't that good. He had like 3.5 ERA, and that's really the best you can expect out of him, in my opinion. So, yeah, I expect him at around 4 ERA and be decent for the Reds. Another guy who's primed for a bounce-back season is Clay Buchholz, who I've also never been that big of a fan of, just like Masterson. But I don't think he's going to have a 5.5 ERA again. He's definitely not that bad of a pitcher. I project him to have maybe a 3.6, 3.5 ERA and be really good for, I mean, he's going to win games with that lineup. Next is a young pitcher who really has shown that he's a pretty good pitcher the past couple of years, Joe Kelly. I think he's going to be a really solid pitcher for the Red Sox this year and make a name for himself. I've always liked him since he came up from the minors with the Cardinals, and I think he'll continue to improve this year. So overall, I think the Red Sox rotation isn't all that great. It's pretty mediocre, especially in this day and age of dominating pitching. However, if they get Cole Hamels and get an ace, I think that they would definitely be in prime position to win the AL East, and I think that they are already. So I think if they get Cole Hamels, they'll run away with it. Now it's time to talk about the Red Sox bullpen. Starting off with the closer, Koji Uehara, who has been one of the top bullpen guys in all of baseball the past 2 years, and I think he'll continue to be dominant again. He's not going to post a 1 ERA like he did in 2013, but I expect him to be about 2.5 and save most, 92% of the games and be an all-star type closer again. Another Japanese-born pitcher in the Red Sox bullpen is Junichi Tazawa, who has been absolutely lights out the past 3 years, and I expect him to continue to do that in the 8th inning again this year for the Red Sox. Another important piece of the Red Sox bullpen this year is going to be Anthony Vivaro, who they got in a trade with the Braves this offseason. The past 2 years, he's had a 2.82 and a 2.63 ERA consecutively in 2013 and 2014. And I expect him to continue to succeed out of the bullpen. He's a solid player, and I expect him to continue to pitch well. The next player out of the bullpen I'm going to talk about is Edward Mujica, who had a bit of a down year last year, having a 3.9 ERA. But in his career, he's been a very solid arm out of the pen. So I expect him to return to form this year and be solid and have a 2.8 ERA and be productive for the Red Sox. Some other arms that may be used this season by the Red Sox are Alexi Ogando, who's a former Ranger who is a very fast thrower. He is a very lively 95+ mile-per-hour fastball. And Robbie Ross Jr., Brandon Workman, and Tommy Lane. And Tommy Lane had an ERA under 1 last year in maybe 15-20 games. So he was very effective, and hopefully he'll continue to do that for the Red Sox. I doubt if he'll be that good again, but as a lefty specialist, he could be pretty solid for them this year. So overall, I think the Red Sox bullpen this year is going to be really solid, and it's definitely one of their strengths along with the lineup. So as I said in my first video I made in the Orioles preview, I think the Red Sox are going to finish first this year. Right now, I think they're going to win 90 games, and if they get Cole Hamels, I expect them to win somewhere between 94, 95, 96, depending on just how good he is. You know, he might not be quite as good transferring to the American League, but yeah, I think that the Red Sox have a really good team this year, and I think they're going to bounce back from a dreadful year in 2014. And I expect them to see them in the playoffs and make another deep run. So in summary, the Red Sox have a loaded lineup with guys like Ortiz, Pedroia, Betts, Hanley Ramirez coming over, Pablo Sandova coming over. We still have Mike Napoli. We still have Shane Victorino off the bench. They have Alan Craig off the bench, who's been an all-star just maybe 2 or 3 years ago, and Brock Holt, who was really good for them last year. And they have a good bullpen, a very solid bullpen. I think that's going to be another one of their strengths. And the big question mark with this team is the starting rotation. A bunch of guys who, question marks, I mean, especially Masterson and Buchholz. If they have good seasons out of them, they might win 100 games. But if they suck, if they both have 5.5 ERAs again, this could be a bad team. Or maybe not bad, but they might not be quite as good as I expect them to be. If they aren't as good as I expect them to be, be solid 3.5 ERA type guys. And yeah, I think that they are a 90 to 95 win team, and I expect them to see them in the playoffs this year. So thanks for watching, everybody, and next video will be the New York Yankees.